All right. So for the study I made today, it was lactate threshold during exercise. What is lactate threshold? Lactate threshold is refers to the exercise intensity at which lactate begins to accumulate in the bloodstream faster than it is cleared. So the higher intensity the exercise is, the more that lactate is produced. It actually marks the shift from predominantly aerobic metabolism to anaerobic metabolism. It's a key indicator of endurance performance and also helps to determine the optimal intensity for sustained exercise and training without fatigue. So basically just when the body is most efficient during exercise that uses the energy most efficiently without being able to waste it into lactate. Before the threshold, lactate is efficiently removed and energy is primarily derived aerobically. Above the threshold, lactate accumulates, leading to muscle fatigue and decline in performance. So that's also when the intensity increases and the body also gets fatigued a little bit faster than it would be at lower intensities. So we have a little graph here that's kind of showing a little bit what I'm talking about here is more low intensity endurance training. You're more on that aerobic threshold. So you're still at a great zone. And once you're in that moderate sweet spot in endurance training, that's when you're the most efficient and basically lactate is accumulating as the intensity increases. So it's actually at a perfect zone so that allows the body to efficiently work during this training session. The more that it's more increased, you can see that lactate is overly produced because the body can't keep up with the oxygen and all that produced while the intensity is increased. Physiological basis about lactate threshold is energy system during low to moderate intensity exercise. Energy is primarily supplied by aerobic metabolism, as I was saying. And as it intensity increases, anaerobic metabolism contributes more. So, as for an endurance runner, the more longer the distance is with the intensity actually increasing, so maybe the speed, the more you're actually going into the anaerobic metabolism. So for lactate production, oxygen delivery can't keep up with demand. So the body produces lactate as a byproduct of anaerobic glycolysis. So as I was saying, is the body can't keep up with the excessive oxygen inhale during the high intensity exercise. So that's when lactate starts to produce and kind of gives that muscle fatigue. Lactate clearance at lower intensities, lactate is cleared or reused by the body, maintaining a steady state. Beyond threshold, lactate accumulates faster than it can be cleared. So at lower intensities, our body is more efficient and we're not getting as tired because obviously the intensity isn't increased. But once that intensity increases, the lactate starts to accumulate faster than we can kind of hold and actually be cleared. That's when our muscles start to be fatigued and then kind of figure out that we're trying to give up at the end. So just kind of adding on to it over here. So glycolysis, glucose moving into pyruvate, and once it moves into pyruvate, then it kind of could go into lactate the more intense the exercise is. But there's also different other chemicals that kind of get produced aerobically in the TSA cycle. So the oxygen gets produced through this cycle and goes all the way through to acetylcholine A, and then it kind of just that's when the body is able to move efficiently when it's able to kind of transition those chemicals and to be able to kind of move efficiently with energy. So aerobic metabolism kind of just on this kind of just shows the more slower intensity, the more energy we're gonna have. Obviously, the more intense our exercises, the more tired we're gonna become quicker, creating that lactate, and that also produces less energy. So a measurement of lactate threshold is blood sampling, usually performed during our graded exercise. In class, we actually did it with the blood glucose monitor and also taking blood samples, kind of the same thing. But I did mine on a bike where the intensity increased out each 3 minute intervals. So that's actually when we kind of took our test for the blood lactate was every 3 minutes. So for ventilatory threshold correlation, identifies when lactate threshold indirectly changes from in breath rate or CO2 production. So basically, the more oxygen is getting inhaled, then CO2 actually getting be able to produced out. So some common tools we kind of use for the measurement of lactate thresholds, also portable lactate analyzers for direct blood lactate measurement, a VO2 max and gas exchange, kind of like the mask we kind of used in class, kind of measures how much CO2 is coming out with more O2 coming out, so more oxygen. So it kind of measures how much oxygen we're getting in and how much CO2 is coming out of our body. So as I was saying, it's kind of like the performance is after each 3 minutes, the intensity increases, and I kind of just go further into that with this directions here. Significance in training, obviously you would get improved endurance the more you trained on this. Improved endurance training near that lactate threshold increases the muscle's ability to sustain aerobic energy production, delaying fatigue. Also, it kind of just shows the longer we are practicing one aspect, the more our body kind of adapts to that. So it's just more body adaptations to the breathing rate that was being produced. Enhanced lactate clearance. Regular training at this level boosts the body's capacity to clear lactate, maintaining performance during prolonged or intense activities. So the more trained we are as an individual, the more we're actually able to sustain that and actually work more efficiently before overproducing on that lactate. Optimized training zones kind of helps the athlete identify the intensity where training is most effective because each athlete is training a little bit differently and each sport has a different goal. So kind of just seeing where that intensity is actually the most effective for that individual. Increased performance efficiency. Elevating the lactate threshold allows athletes to perform at higher intensity for longer levels, crucial for endurance like sports, running, and swimming. A lot of these sports encourage a lot of endurance, actually. So, a lot of this training will allow us to perform the swimming, the cycling for longer periods of time because we are actually able to optimize the oxygen and CO2 coming in and out of the body. Some factors influencing lactate threshold, fitness level. The higher the fitness level, increases the lactate threshold. Just because the more fit we are, the more we're actually able to hire these high, actually able to sustain these higher intensities for a longer period of time. Usually, age always plays a factor. Younger individuals often have a higher lactate threshold due to better recovery and adaptive capacity. Basically, as we age, the slower our processes are, and the harder it is to maintain the energy for a longer period of time. Just because our body is going to require more oxygen, and just it gets tired more quickly. Training adaptations for aerobic training, it enhances mitochondrial density and function, improving lactate clearance. So the more efficient the body is able to produce, the more energy is actually being able to use and actually just more efficiently using a good split between the energy and also intensity. Anaerobic training increases tolerance to lactate accumulation. So the more you're increasing that intensity, the more the body's actually adapting to those intensity as we keep going at higher levels, as long as we kind of maintain training performance on each. Also, just like kind of genetics, kind of correlating to both of these, but muscle fiber composition, a higher proportion of slow twitch fibers improves lactate threshold due to greater oxidative capacity. Fast twitch fibers produce more lactate during intense exercise. Like first fast twitch fibers actually are more for quicker movements and actually require more mitochondria energy, so it actually produces more energy but actually fatigues us a little bit faster. So the more slow twitch fibers somebody has, maybe more of an endurance runner, the more they're actually able to improve their lactate threshold. Nutrition is always going to be key. So, adequate glycogen storage, improve energy efficiency during lactate buildup, and also dehydration or poor fueling could reduce the threshold. So, the more you're dehydrated, the more actually you're going to get tired more faster because there's no blood into the muscles that are actually going to be able to use into some energy. So also environmental conditions will also play a factor because the heat, humidity, and altitude can produce lactate production and lower the threshold temporarily. For example, in places like Colorado, the basketball players that actually train there are more accumulate to getting tired for actually fatiguing after a longer period because the altitude requires a little bit more oxygen that we're getting breathing out in and out throughout exercise. So the more you're adapted to that, the longer you can actually work at your higher intensity. So this is actually a substrate use of increasing intensity during the lactate threshold exercise that we actually did in class. As you can see that our lactate actually increases within intensity, and the more our body actually starts to actually get tired with the higher speeds. So you can actually kind of see that the more that we go up in intensity, the more that we're kind of fatiguing at the end. Practical implications, some training optimization is designing specific workouts to improve lactate clearance and also delay onset of fatigue. So basically onset soreness. So basically being more adapted to these exercises would improve just more endurance in the long run. Using lactate threshold to determine training zone for endurance athletes. Finding that training zone is important because we can kind of figure out the perfect intensity to work with these athletes so they can progress as quickly. Performance pacing, identify sustainable exercise intensities for long duration events. Also, avoiding early burnout to stay below the lactate threshold in races, more for endurance runners. A lot of them, you could see that they carbohydrate load, so they could burn more carbs before getting into fats and then lactate eventually. Personalized training plans, also adjusting your training plans based on the individual's lactate threshold. So then we can slowly progress the lactate threshold with more adaptations to the endurance and higher intensities. Some practical implications also continued. We can also see that for endurance athletes, we maximize efficiency for long events. But for high intensity sports, we're improving anaerobic capacity recovery between sprints. So just making sure that we kind of recover so that lactate kind of is moving more efficiently in our body. So rehabilitation and health, safe reintroduction to exercise for patients recovering from illness and recovery because someone that's been out for a longer time might have a lot the higher lactate threshold than somebody's been training for a longer period of time. In conclusion, lactate threshold is a critical marker for distinguishing aerobic and anaerobic exercise intensities. And training near the lactate threshold improves endurance, efficiency, and performance in sports. It can be measured using tools like blood lactate analyzers, and also or estimated through just during exercises, maybe with the mass or something that we kind of used in class. Understanding or utilizing lactate threshold data helps athletes optimize their training performances and also training and also performance goals. So just basically optimizing these trainings towards their goal and also like sport. Further research and practical applications can enhance its role in athletic training. So more an athletic trainer knows about your lactate threshold, the more they can kind of progress you and kind of work in your personal intensity range, kind of help your body move as efficiently as possible.